Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and today I'm back to talk about Severance Season 2, Episode 8 on Apple TV+. Well, flip my toboggan because Sweet Vitriol is a complete Harmony Cobel bottle episode. We got a lot of context on her backstory, where she's from, this poor depraved town of Salt's Neck, where everybody is still addicted to ether after all this time. Harmony worked in an ether factory at 8 years old, was busy huffing ether. We learned that she was also a Wintertide Fellow, and the big reveal from this episode, she's the one who came up with the idea of Severance, which I imagine is fully inspired by ether itself. We've seen ether represented in the various Kier paintings. We know that Kier and Imogen actually met at an ether factory. So ether is a big part of the show in general and inspired the entire idea of Severance itself. But before we get more into that, I am going to talk about ether, how it inspired this, and the fact that ether and Dieter sound and look kind of alike, and the fact that ether could have been causing all these hallucinations for Kier in Kier Eagan National Forest. Another little kind of wild theory here I'm going to get into regarding, could Harmony Cobel be Helly's mom? Don't come at me. I'm just going to go over a couple reasons why I think that. I mean, it could totally be wrong, but worth a discussion. Before we get into it, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button and like this video. If you enjoy videos like this where I talk about dark and mysterious TV shows, then you should stick with me for more TV talk. All right, so the word vitriol itself has a couple of different meanings. It can mean bitterly harsh or caustic language or criticism, which the language in Severance itself is a little bit strange. I mean, just the old-timey language in general, especially in this episode, there is a lot of caustic language. There's a lot of discord here in this town, a lot of literal bitterness. Vitriol can also refer to acid in chemistry, something acidic, and then ether itself. Ether, of course, is a pleasant-smelling, colorless, volatile liquid that is highly flammable. It's used as an anesthetic and a solvent or intermediate in an industrial process. Ether can also refer to the clear sky, the upper regions of air beyond the clouds, which I do think is a metaphor for Severance itself, right? Because essentially, your head is up in the clouds when you are either converted to an innie or an outie. Part of you is somewhere else within your mind. It's floating above the rest of you, essentially. So there is a little bit of a double entendre, both with the word vitriol and ether, and the fact that the episode is called Sweet Vitriol. Sweet does refer to the sweet scent of ether as well. And the effects of ether intoxication are very similar to alcohol, but much more potent. And what really got me thinking about ether, I started thinking about Kier Eagan, and the fact that ether itself, the full proper name, is diethyl ether. And if you look at the letters and the way they're spelled, does anyone else think that it's giving Dieter? And is it possible that our guy Kier didn't actually have the twin? I did a whole video on it. I'm going to put the card up there so you can click and watch it after. But I never believed that Dieter was actually Kier's twin. This gives more credence to that. I think Kier was out there huffing some ether. Dieter was kind of a code name for that. And everything he saw, him spilling his lineage, etc., melting into the forest, were due to the effects of intoxication from ether itself. It does have anesthetic and euphoric effects, and having too much of it, especially if you're out there on your own in a big snowy forest, I mean, who knows what exactly your mind is going to do to you in that scenario. And in this scenario, I think he imagined his twin brother was doing some stuff, disappeared into the forest, and ether essentially created this alter ego of Kier. And ether is no joke. In Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, there's this whole big quote about all of the drugs that they are bringing with them to Vegas. But the ending of that quote is really interesting to me. The only thing that really worried me was the ether. There's nothing in the world more helpless and irresponsible and depraved than a man in the depths of an ether binge. I mean, right? Was Kier out there on an ether binge imagining this whole Dieter situation all along? We know he had early exposure and experience with ether at the ether factory where he met his wife, Imogen. And seeing how ether essentially tore this town apart, got everybody addicted to it. Everyone who worked in the factory was exposed to it, probably suffered from long-term respiratory symptoms. And I also think that's a metaphor for how big corporations do come into towns and ruin them, and also how Lumon itself could essentially ruin humanity with the severance procedure, not allowing people to feel their feelings. And I understand the whole point of why Harmony Cobel even came up with this concept of severance was because her mom was suffering. She had really good intentions. She didn't want her mom to have to live through all of this suffering. However, Lumon adopted it for other purposes. Innies and outies, for one, developing this workforce of people who will do whatever. But something that really struck me when Harmony was in her mom's room, there was an article about Kier Eagan taking over as the Lumon CEO. We know Harmony Cobel's mom was not into Lumon. Her aunt Sissy definitely was, but not Charlotte, Cobel's mom. So if Cobel's mom wasn't buying into Lumon, I mean, it could just be because of what the corporation did to their town. But what if it's because Kier Eagan actually did something to her daughter? What if when Harmony Cobel and Kier were spending all of this time together developing the severance procedure that Lumon, by the way, totally took credit for, took away this accomplishment from Miss Cobel, ridiculous. What if, due to the effects of ether, something happened between them when she was younger, and maybe she became pregnant and carried Helly as a child? Now, I believe Leonora could definitely be Helly's mom. However, we should not put anything out of the realm of possibility with this show. And it would also make sense because there was that comment when Helly first came down to the severed floor and woke up on the table. They asked her, "What color is or were your mother's eyes?" Were they testing her because they know that her actual mother, Miss Cobel, is on the severed floor, and they wanted to see if she would have any recollection of that, if she would recognize her mother? It would also explain the disharmonious relationship between Harmony and Helly. Not to mention both of their names begin with an H, which could actually mean nothing at all, but still a thing. And Miss Cobel made that comment about not being born into this like Helly was. Is she bitter towards her own daughter? But when Miss Cobel and Helly were sitting in that conference table in Lumon, and Harmony said something like, "You're afraid of me," and Helly said, "We fear no one," I just pick up that there could be more to this potentially. And again, this could just be a totally wild theory, but now that we know more about Harmony, the fact that she was the one to come up with this idea, the fact she spent a lot of time with Kier Eagan, and it seems like they like taking advantage of people. And could that taking advantage have bled over into taking advantage of a young girl who came up with a brilliant idea, maybe trying to disillusion her a little bit, believe her into thinking that this is for the common good, it's not her credit to take, and then also impregnate her? And doesn't Cobel kind of give mother vibes? I mean, she was committing lactation consultant fraud. She seemed to be pretty knowledgeable. She seemed to kind of have that experience with kids before. So is it possible that, yeah, she is Helly's mom? I actually enjoyed this episode, though. I liked getting to know Miss Cobel more. She's a huge character in the show. I've seen a little bit of criticism for this episode out there. I think for me, the big part I didn't like was the fact that it was much shorter. I wouldn't have minded more, although I don't know how much more they could have given us. I mean, yeah, maybe they could have fast forwarded a little bit and seen Miss Cobel actually meeting up with Devin and Mark. But 38 minutes for this show? Come on, guys. Like, give us 12 more minutes, please. And one more thing I think that's interesting with that whole Wintertide Fellowship is now we see Miss Huang kind of mirroring that situation. It makes me think, there's been a lot of talk about, is Miss Huang a robot, et cetera, clone, whatever. No, she's not. She's going to Miss Myrtle's school just like Miss Cobel did, following in her literal footsteps. There were some funny things in this episode too. I appreciated that the yearbook said something like annual reminiscences. I thought that was kind of funny. And another thing I thought was funny is that the mascot of her school was the Fighting Kids. And I did not put these two pieces together myself. I did see this inadvertently online today, but the Fighting Kids. Kid is a name for a baby goat. So we even got some goat references here. All in all, what did you think about this episode? Was anybody surprised to find out that Harmony Cobel came up with the idea of severance inspired by ether itself? And most importantly, do you buy into my idea that Kier Eagan is actually a made-up entity based on the ether hallucinations of Kier Eagan out in Kier Eagan National Forest? I think so. I appreciate you tuning in. I will be back, of course, to finish out the season of Severance. I'm also covering The White Lotus on HBO Max. And I'm currently planning out my TV coverage for the next couple of months, so if there's any shows that you're excited about, drop them in the comments, and I will be back again soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Media Melanie. Clicking off.